Awesome. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for taking a few minutes to stop by the booth and listen to our presentation. We are here today to tell you about Vicon motion tracking systems. We're going to talk a little bit about who Vicon is, some of our history working in the VFX and animation space, and a little bit of our journey to working in virtual production and being here on the View Virtual Production Central booth at this conference. So if you have heard of Vicon in the past, most likely it's because we're a company that's been around for about 40 years, and we've been doing over 20 years of motion capture tracking. That's mostly in the past been your traditional tracking of an actor wearing a motion capture suit with markers attached to it so you could drive animated characters in movies and video games. We have a few examples up here on the screen, maybe some studios you've heard of before. But I did want to start off maybe with a few examples of what it looks like to use a Vicon system in a studio. What does it look like to be doing this type of character animation? What does it look like to do our cameras for virtual production? And we have a really nice demo reel that I'll let play through for about a minute to give you an idea of what this looks like when you put it all together in a studio. And I like that the demo reel does show a little bit of virtual production, a little bit of character tracking, because that really is one of the big advantages of using Vicon as your tracking system in your studio. You can set up the cameras in your studio, you can be tracking a camera, and then in that exact same space, if you have a project that calls for motion capture or tracking any other type of objects, you have the tracking system in place and you can do lots of different types of projects. So let this play here for a minute as a nice intro, and it's going to be a surprise to all of us whether or not it has sound.
Thank you, and background action.
Like a Where's Waldo game. Can you pick out the Vicon cameras in each one of these? Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's a little bit less obvious where our system is set up and what we're tracking. Fun. I'd love to let that keep playing, but I will move on for the sake of time. Hopefully that's a good intro and some good visuals there, so you get a sense of what kind of a system we're here to talk about today. Especially if you haven't seen one of these systems in action, I thought it would be useful to just kind of go through a little bit about what is a Vicon system, what are the products, what do we set up when we do our tracking. So in general, Vicon is usually what's referred to as an outside-in tracking system. So we'll start with a series of cameras set up around the perimeter of a volume that we want to track. You may or may not have noticed them, but we actually have cameras set up here on the booth. So we have 7 that go across the top of the LED wall here, and we have 3 set up on the light bar over top of your heads. So the idea is the cameras are set up around a space. They're looking into a volume that we're going to calibrate, and this is the area where we want to track objects. The great thing is we can track pretty much anything inside of that calibrated space. We can put what we call markers on actors in a suit. We can put it on objects that the actors are using, such as props like swords or head-mounted displays. We can track cameras, virtual cameras like a iPad that's looking into your space. Or filming cameras like in virtual production. So really anything we put a marker on inside of this space is something we can track. The markers themselves can be a couple different types. We use passive markers, which is where the cameras themselves emit a light that bounces off of the markers attached to the object we're tracking, and that's how they become visible to the cameras. Or we can use active tracking markers. So if you look at the camera that's set up on the booth here, this is an example of our active tracking markers. That specific type of marker is called our supernova. They're extra bright LEDs, and they emit light themselves, and that's how they become visible to our trackers so that we can pick up their position. So lots of flexibility in this space around what we can track in the space, what we use as markers to track those objects, and eventually all of that information is sent over to our software, which is called Shogun, and I'll talk a little bit about that more in a few minutes. But essentially it is a hardware-software combination product to do lots of different types of tracking inside of your environment. So just working through a few visuals that kind of show you a little bit more about what this might look like when it's set up. You kind of start by defining what is the area I want to track. And the nice thing is the system is super flexible. We can track small areas, like the size of this small stage that we're standing on, and we can track really, really large areas. You might have noticed in the demo reel that some of those studios are really, really large studios, and we can scale by using more cameras the amount of size that we're tracking in. So we put cameras around the space, and then you need to decide, well, what do I want to track inside of that space? Again, that can be people, objects, cameras for virtual production, and we need to put markers of some sort, either passive or active, on those objects so they become visible to the cameras, and those are now the positions that we are tracking. And then all of that gets piped into the software, as I just mentioned, and our software is called Shogun. So this is a nice video that shows in real time what that all looks like as it comes into our software. So you can see she's holding a prop, a sword. You can see there's a camera off the side that has some tracking markers on it. All of this is coming into our software and being tracked. The latency is extremely low. We're talking just a few milliseconds. And the accuracy is sub-millimeter. We can get down to 17 microns with our rigid objects. That is the width of a human hair. So these are kind of some of the features and benefits of tracking, again, with a Vicon system. So that's an overall kind of general idea of how we get some information. But what is our software doing? There's a few main things that our software can take care of for you. If you are doing motion capture of characters, which some of you may or may not be doing, the software takes care of all of your full body motion capture. So it takes those individual markers and turns that into a skeleton that's driving your animated character. And then we have all of the objects and props. So that might be something that an actor is interacting with, like swords, or it could be an object like a film camera. And then we can stream all of that information to various programs. You know, Unreal being a big one, and we have a Live Link plugin for all the versions of Unreal. We have a plugin for Unity, and if you're doing some animation in Autodesk Motion Builder or lots of other programs, we can send data over to those both in real time and in post as well. And then I will just make a mention, just for a little bit of completeness about the software. If you are doing character animation or even working with objects, if what you're driving with the movement does not have the same scale as the physical person or object that you're tracking, we can do some scaling and retargeting in our software for you as well to aid with the real-time streaming. So a little bit of an introduction there that covered a lot of different types of tracking. So why are we here at Virtual Production Central? How does this apply to virtual production and in-camera VFX? First of all, just a couple of notes about virtual production in general. It's, you know, if you've been following the presentations here on the booth, it's been a pretty solid theme of all of the panels. Virtual production is not a defined thing. It's not a singular product. Well, Vue is making this a little bit easier for you, but in general, you don't go buy a virtual production on Amazon and have it arrive in a crate at your studio. It's a combination of a lot of different technologies. It's a combination of a lot of different techniques and pipelines and workflows. It's people who previously were working in different cultures of productions that were really isolated, and now everybody's coming together and trying to figure out how to work together to bring the real and the digital all together into one space. And that's super exciting because it requires a lot of creativity, it requires a lot of flexibility, a lot of learning from one another. And that's really the philosophy that we've taken at Vicon when we've tried to tweak, massage, innovate on top of our existing motion capture products and make them more tailored fit to the virtual production space. So what kind of features do you need to work inside of a virtual production environment? So we've really been leaning into our existing partners. It's exciting to have some of them in the audience here with us today. So if you have some questions later about what it's like to use Vicon in an actual production setting, we have several people in the audience that are doing that. And we have some really awesome partners. Industrial Light and Magic is a really good example. And I know on the season 1 of their Mandalorian project, which you guys have probably heard of that, they used some other hardware that was kind of in-house. But then they came to us and leaned into the relationship that we had with them through character motion capture and said, can you help us do something that's more solid, more accurate, a little bit easier to use, and just kind of seamless in our virtual production workflow? So we've been working with partners like that to try to understand what are the peculiarities of working in a virtual production setup, and how can we make our products a little bit more tailor-made to that environment. So that is definitely a trend that you will see continue. And speaking of fun and interesting environments, to work in. This is an example from the Warner Brothers Leavesden stage, is that correct? This is House of Dragon shoot, and I like this example because it shows just, again, that complexity of what a virtual production setup might look like. They've got rain spraying all over the place. There's a bunch of wind going on. We've got some prop pieces and some set pieces. We've got the actors. We've got people running all of these machines. So how do we make a system that can work in any type of environment such as this and do it in a way that's really just kind of easy and doesn't require this production and all of these people that are working in this space to kind of stop what they're doing because they have to monkey around with the motion capture system. Well, on the surface, this problem is similar to what I've been showing in the past. We need to define what our capture volume is and set up cameras around it and calibrate this space. And then we need to define what we want to capture. The main object that we're capturing in this example is the camera that's on this crane. So we're going to put one of these tracking objects on it. Although it's not called out here in this kind of outline, there's actually another tracking object over on some of the set pieces there. So we can track a whole bunch of different things in this space. And we can tell you where your camera is, and with relation to the same global origin that the camera is being tracked against, we can tell you where any of the other items are in that space. And so if it's beneficial to know where is this, I don't know, I'll call it tower that the actor is on top of, what is its height, how does it line up with some other objects in the space, we can put tracking markers on all of those things and tell you all of that information in real time, all related to each other. So really quick about the tracking markers that we use. We're going to be using the active ones today to talk a little bit more about how we're going to track this camera on the stage. There's a couple of different options. And I wanted to show this because I have had a few questions about this earlier in the show. So this is our Supernova product, and this has a little bit of a DIY feel to it. You get strands of cable, and you get the high-powered LEDs that you can snap into place along that cable anywhere you need them. And that basically allows you to set up the tracking markers in any configuration that works for your camera. So if your camera needs to be moving really tight against some set props or is mounted on a gimbal where it needs to rotate, you have ways to mount the tracking system so it's really out of the way and it's not hindering any movements that you might need to be able to do. When you get into really large volumes, then we need to make those markers a little bit more visible and you're not restricted by something, like a gimbal that's moving your camera. We also have this as a product that's coming out. It's our marker crown, and it's just going to make it kind of really easy to set up markers in unique patterns. The idea is you could have a few of these in the closet. They don't cost very much in relation to the entire system. They'll have pre-configured configurations, and so the system already knows, let's say this is object 1 and maybe you have another one of these with a slightly different pattern that will already be set up. Let's just call it object 2 in your software. And if you need to change camera in the middle of your shoot, you can move object 1 to a different camera, or you can have camera 2 already have an object on it and just roll it out into space and it's ready to track. So the idea is that it can be really seamless to make adjustments on the fly. You don't have to stop your production, ask your director to wait, ask the talent to step aside. If you need to recalibrate something, set up a new object, we're going to make that really easy for you with these tracking crowns. We are also working on a version that's going to have an inertial sensor embedded in it. So if you get into some really crazy set environment where for a small amount of time you lose all visibility of the tracking markers, there is a backup actual tracking sensor, an IMU, that can take over so you're not going to actually lose data at any point. Just a really quick note, if you're not shooting in front of an LED wall, even though they are all the rage these days and seem to be everywhere, and you're shooting just in an open environment or with a green screen, really for us, when it comes to the tracking, it's a very similar tracking problem. We're going to define the volume, we're going to set up some cameras, it could be on tripods, we're going to put markers on the objects we want to track, and we can do it in multiple different types of environments for you. So again, going back to the software, we're using our Shogun software both for all of that character tracking and animation that I was talking about in the beginning, and also for our object tracking. There are actually 2 parallel streams of algorithms that can ingest data. So we have one that's really customized and really set up to do kind of tracking of we'll call them flexible objects. We're kind of squishy as humans. Things need to be able to move, and we need to track that as a skeleton. But when we're tracking cameras and props, those are rigid objects. And there are now other constraints in place that can help us track those with even more precision and lower latency, because we know that the marker configuration on that rigid object isn't going to change. So we have some special algorithms in the software specifically set up for rigid objects, but it's all inside of one software, and you can do those things together really nicely. So once you define your object, you can then attach it to your camera, both in our system and out into, for example, Unreal that we're going to be working with today, so that you're driving the view of your camera. And we can also ingest SDI camera feeds, and so we can bring that video image into our software, and we have a really nice calibration feature where with just waving an object in front of the camera, we can calculate some of its lens distortion and give you some information about a calibrated lens. So that's a little bit about some of the specific features we put in our software to, again, make this product more tailor fit to what the virtual production space is needing from us for a tracking solution. So the results are really exciting. Again, we've got a lot of studios putting out a lot of productions that you probably have heard of, and we're really excited to be a part of them. We're really excited to be learning what they're learning, getting feedback from them, and continuing to iterate and do design upgrades on all of our tools and put them out to make our system even easier to use. And I do want to make sure that we take just a moment of our presentation to give a shout out to View Studios. I really am excited about what they're doing. Virtual production is this phrase that we're using now to refer to this production technique that, that merging of the digital and real, that technique that really got propelled forward during the pandemic, during a time where you couldn't do certain types of productions in any other way. Virtual production was the way, and so it really accelerated growth in this area. View has definitely established themselves as one of the early adopters of these techniques, and it's exciting to see how they're integrating and bringing everything together for people. So we ourselves as Vicon, we are a tracking solution. We're going to track your camera, but you might want to know how you combine that with LED walls or how you get that to sync with all of the other equipment in your studio, and they've got a ton of experience to do that. And so we're excited to be able to bring our tracking system into a part of what they're doing and some of the kind of service and knowledge that they can spread out to anybody else who's curious about how to get started or how to make this all work together in a studio. So with that, I want to hand it over to Marissa here for a few minutes. She's going to take you through a little bit of a introduction to what some of this looks like in practice with a kind of a brief demo. But if you are interested while we're getting set up, that is our website for some more information. And if it works and you can get that QR code off the screen, that's going to take you to a special page that we've set up for the NAB show that has a bunch of videos and examples about our work specific to virtual production. So that's it for me. I'm going to turn it over to you, Marissa. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amy. My name is Marissa Liu. I am a VFX support engineer for Vicon. So a lot of what I do is going out and installing new systems for customers and training customers on how to use our software. Actually, would it be possible for us, to flip back to the PowerPoint? I think we had the video at the end. There was one last slide on there. So again, the idea of being able to calibrate in an SDI camera into our system allows us to be able to place the nodal point of that camera, or to be able to place our root bone of our prop that we're going to be driving in Unreal Engine. It's able to place that nodal or that root bone right at the nodal point. So this is sort of a nice little video. We have our studio in LA. We have a small LED wall in there and a Red Komodo camera in here. So right now this is prior to the SDI calibration. And this is our software on the screen here. So we have all of our cameras listed on the left-hand side of the screen. And this is going to be doing a wand wave using a calibration wand that we have that the system's going to be looking for very, very specific ratios and distances of the lights on this wand. and that's what this looks like. So this is able to, we're waving this wand in front of the SDI camera, which allows that camera then to understand where it is in relationship to the rest of the volume. So this is just adding in an SDI camera, just like what we have here, into a system of our cameras that's already been calibrated. So as we get those wand waves in front of the camera is then able to process that information, and then we're able to place that camera into our volume. So George is in this video uncovering the markers that we already have on top of the camera. And you can see it's a little bit hard to see in the software here, but as he zooms in here, so those pink dots are the 3D reconstructions of the markers, and in here he's going in and creating a prop out of that marker cloud. So he selects all of the markers, creates the prop. Now we have that prop bone, that blue bone, and it's kind of placed at an odd spot in the marker cloud right now. But as soon as we link that SDI camera to the prop, it kind of snaps into place to place it right at the nodal point. That way, when we go to pipe and stream that data into something like Unreal Engine, we're able to know exactly where that camera rotation should be happening as we go and move the physical camera and seeing what that looks like in Unreal Engine. And so that is a calibration of the SDI camera. So we do have one set up already here. So we can go ahead and switch over to what that looks like on our software side of things. And I'm just going to walk around to the back of the computer over here. Awesome. So in here, we've got our, this one, our software. You can see right now we have some of these cameras set up against the top of the wall. Again, these are very small cameras. They're called Viper cameras, and they are only looking for active markers. So we already have in our software here this prop set up with 5 markers. What our cameras are seeing is these are our 2D view of what the cameras are seeing. So for example, we're looking at the grayscale data that's coming through here of those 5 markers that we have placed on top of the camera. So similar to how George in the video set up that calibration, right now we have our camera prop created out here, and we can come over and we can, I believe we've got our frustum driving in our Unreal scene in the background here. And so you can see that we're getting that data that we're collecting in Shogun. It's live streaming into Unreal. So we get that camera frustum being tracked. So I think that is kind of the conclusion of our talk and our demo. So I think we can open up the floor to any questions that anyone might have.
I was just gonna ask is the motion capture suits that you showed earlier, are you using the planner product for it?
No, so the motion capture suits that we have actors wear or talent wear for doing full body motion capture, it's basically a Velcro suit, and we're sticking on passive markers that are painted with a retroreflective paint. And so with those, we're using different cameras that have a strobe on them, an IR strobe, and that sends out that light. The camera's looking for anything that's going to reflect that light straight back. Yes, correct. Yes. Yeah, so it's different from like an inertial suit that has sort of the sensors built into it. So this is us placing those markers on an individual person. So we get very individualized skeleton matching in the software. Nope. My bad. Okay. Oh. Over there.
Just out of curiosity, does Shogun sit on a Linux box? Are you actually on a Linux platform for Shogun?
Linux. Do we run off of Linux? No. I believe we only run off of Windows at this point.
Yeah, so we have an SDK that can send data over to Linux. So our Shogun will be installed on a Windows PC, but then we have the data stream where we can send all that data over to a Linux machine to be used in real time, if you like.